Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today I wanted to talk about the Internet Computer Protocol. Now this is one that is really interesting because this does fit within like the DEPIN sector, and so you guys all should probably know by now that I'm pretty bullish on DEPIN overall, just because I think it's going to provide some opportunities that we previously would have never been able to imagine, similar to the internet prior to the internet. So I look at DEPIN providing a lot of this same type of capability, and Internet Computer is one that I think could play a very pivotal role within that, because I think one thing that a lot of people don't understand is that a lot of what we're doing in crypto is essentially being allowed by Amazon and Google and a lot of these other companies. I know that's probably an unpopular truth, but it is the truth nonetheless, because if you think about it, between essentially Google Cloud and Amazon Web Services, they control like 80% of the servers or something like that. And so effectively the internet runs on AWS and Google Cloud. And Internet Computer is interesting because it essentially is a decentralized AWS or Google Cloud or something like that. And so what it does, it allows us the flexibility of essentially not being dependent on two major players, worldwide. And so let's go on ahead and talk a little bit more further about Internet Computer and what it does. So to start out, we're going to go into essentially, what it is, and then after that we'll go kind of into, a brief overview of how it works, the roadmap, kind of how the token fits into the ecosystem, and then from there we'll go into some price action and talk about the chart a little bit. Now, before we get into any of that, I did want to talk about trading ICP on Margex. Margex is a really great leveraged trading platform. So you can actually trade ICP up to 25x leverage. So if you are, very invested within the ICP ecosystem and you feel like you've got a pretty good sense of where the coin is going to be going and kind of some of the short-term moves it's going to make, like for example, we've just seen a pretty strong pullback and we may even continue to see it moving to the downside, because this kind of looks to be the next level of at least recent support that we've seen. So, if you feel like you have a pretty good sense of where these types of things are going, definitely try Margex. It is a really great leverage trading platform. I've been trading on it recently. You can see I have two trades open. I've got a Jasmy and a Bitcoin trade. My Jasmy trade is currently sitting at 132% in profit, and my Bitcoin one is 108%. So, pretty decent overall. I've already taken some profits on my Jasmy trade. I haven't yet on Bitcoin, but as you can see, I've got a relatively tight stop loss on this. And this stop loss actually at this point is in profit. This would be 84% profit. So not bad overall. Again, given that the market is so uncertain, I am trading with relatively small amounts. So, nothing that's going to hurt too bad if I lose on. If this is something that's interesting, check my link in the description. Margex is doing up to $10,000 in bonuses right now. They're also doing a $500,000 Caspa airdrop. So if you're interested in that, this would be something that would be really useful. Also, one thing I did not mention about Margex is there's no KYC and there is also no VPNs needed. So you can essentially sign up and get started trading right away. But going back into ICP, let's go and start kind of going into what it is. So ICP, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is essentially a decentralized like web hosting provider, right? So you can operate on the ICP ecosystem, you can create apps, you can create websites, you can do all this type of stuff, and essentially it's all hosted within this decentralized internet. And so what this allows for is, you can see we can essentially pull the web directly from smart contracts, we can connect web 2 and web 3, which this part to me is very important, because I think a lot of what people are struggling with currently is how does web 2 kind of transition into web 3, right? And if ICP can really help kind of make this transition more seamless, that's going to be huge. So the other thing too is, the performance. A lot of issues that we're having, particularly with kind of base layers, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana's starting to figure it out. But ultimately, a lot of the issues that we've had is both throughput and then time to finality, right? And so with Internet Computer, they're 1 to 2 seconds to reach finality. They essentially have 1.1 query calls per second, 21,000 almost update calls per second, 200 millisecond query calls. So, this is like almost internet level speeds, right? Which is, I would say, really impressive for a decentralized network. And it's something that, I think is definitely a viable competitor to what we have, at least currently. So, it's 100% on chain. There's no cloud. There's no anything like that. We've got this reverse gas model. We'll get to this talking about the token in a second. So the next thing I want to go into is essentially how it works, right? And there's a lot of stuff going on here that we could talk about. Some of these, I'll probably come back to in a later video. But the biggest thing that we want to look at right now is essentially the chain evolution technology, right? This is how we turn blockchain into like an internet level capability in terms of throughput and volume and all that type of stuff, right? And so obviously, the infinite scalability, it's, they say the internet computer scales its capacity horizontally by creating new subnets that host additional canisters, just like traditional cloud infrastructure scales by adding new machines. Once the IC's network nervous system decides to create a new subnet, it selects a group of spare nodes that have joined the IC but have not yet been allocated to any subnet and creates the initial configuration of the new subnet. The selected group of nodes then begins to form a new subnet blockchain. So this is essentially kind of how cloud computing works, right? Like you have data centers around that are responsible for hosting different types of, or I guess like different pieces of the internet, I guess you could call it, right? And then once once a new piece of the internet is needed, then they spin up more servers to handle that capability. So this is essentially all ICP or Internet Computer is doing as well, is they're just essentially using their blockchain to dictate when that's going to happen, and then they'll allocate extra nodes to that. The other thing they have here is fault tolerance, same type of thing. This actually could potentially, now it's hard to say exactly how this is going to work, but potentially this could make the internet computer even more robust than like cloud computing, right? Because we've all seen in recent history when, Amazon Web Services like servers go down, like half the internet goes out, right? That essentially could be the same thing here, but they have fault tolerance. So if a certain threshold or below a certain threshold goes out and is removed from the network, it's not going to affect the capabilities of the internet computer like stability too tangibly. So the other thing after that is the network nervous system. It's like an algorithmic governance system. One of its many duties of the NNS is to orchestrate upgrades of the internet computer to a new protocol when the community has adopted an upgrade proposal. This is really interesting because usually in a lot of crypto, you need to have hard forks essentially to make this happen, right? And so this is really interesting that essentially it's built in the flexibility to upgrade its protocol and essentially keep current and keep upgrading the protocol as new technology becomes available. This is something that we're seeing with some of the older blockchains that are built very rigid, is as technology increases and it then develops, it becomes difficult to kind of shoehorn some of these new higher compute, like heavier lift types of technologies into these older blockchains that may not have necessarily been built for that, which is what leads to these hard forks. So this is all essentially the governance for how ICP works. ICP token, essentially, you can use it to stake and actually govern the network overall, but you also, right here, the developers essentially will use the ICP token to purchase cycles to power their dApps on the internet computer. Now, this is why they call it like the reverse gas fee, right? Because usually, like if I want to operate on Ethereum, I need to pay gas fees. And so this is something that is very much different because the developers actually have to pay gas fees. Similar to what you would see on the internet today with, if I have a website or I have an app, I need to pay the web hosting fees. And then obviously it's up to me to monetize my site to essentially, make those web hosting fees and all that stuff back. So, this is very similar to what we're seeing in the more traditional internet. This also helps from a speed of transaction and also just like usage and like quality of life operating on the internet, right? Because if every time you want to do something, you have to pay a gas fee, like that obviously is not ideal, right? And so putting this on the back end and then essentially having monetization techniques like have developed in the internet, whether it's ads or subscription models, anything like that, that is essentially where we need to get to. So moving on, we have Internet Computer has this whole massive roadmap, and in case you haven't gathered this yet, Internet Computer, like their whole ecosystem is incredibly detailed and robust. So if you want to do some of your own research, I would say going to their like website is definitely a great place to start, and then you can kind of expand out your research from there. But so instead of diving through all the details of the roadmap, I'll just kind of show you the main topics that they kind of focus on when they're pushing updates. So we've got compute platform, decentralized AI, we've got chain fusion, privacy, platform decentralization, identity, digital assets, governance and tokenomics, developer experience. So those are kind of all, and you can see, they pushed, 21 past features. They've got, I think, 8 kind of that are like on deck, I guess you could call it, to use a baseball term, and then 27 future features. So next I want to go into kind of what is the ICP token and how does it work. And so the ICP token kind of works like Ethereum post-merge. Some of the ICP people may hate me for saying that because I'm pretty sure Internet Computer actually did this first, but it essentially works like Ethereum post-merge. So essentially node providers are rewarded in ICP tokens for essentially providing the network, right? But then when people are actually using the protocol and they're actually, funding like the cycles on their apps, they're actually burning those tokens. So there's kind of like a mint and burn type of mechanism similar to Ethereum. So essentially, the more activity that there is on the network, the more tokens will be burned, and the less network or the less activity, the less tokens will be burned. Again, this creates a kind of a fluctuating dynamic where ICP can in fact go deflationary, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not a deflationary token. It can also be inflationary as well. So the other thing I wanted to look at going into the next thing is kind of the overall health of ICP. So we can see on the world map, they've got relatively global coverage. They've got nodes worldwide. We do still have some gaps that, if we were to get to truly internet scale, that would need to be filled in. But overall, especially in Western, generally all of Europe, and then most of the US, a little bit sparse within kind of the Midwest area. But most of the, I guess, West generally you could define it as is pretty well built out. South America is lacking a little bit, but you can see we've got just shy of 1,500 node machines and about 560 subnets. So there's definitely a lot of growth going on. We can see an active block count being added to the blockchain. We can see transactions per second, which right now we're seeing about 3,600, which again is nowhere even close to what the internet is doing, obviously, but pretty decent throughput overall for right now. And then this is the ETH equivalent transactions, just because the compute on ICP is much higher than the compute that's actually being done on Ethereum. That goes to about 445,000 transactions a second. Obviously this is always fluctuating, so this is really interesting. Overall it shows pretty decent growth. We can see over the past year staying relatively stable overall. Things are looking, I would say, stable. There's not a ton of growth going on here. We can see, kind of a general uptrend here, but I would say even maybe lately a little bit of a downtrend ever since about mid-April, which again, this kind of coincides with the summer lull. So I don't know that this is too shocking, but overall, relatively flat looking. So the next thing I wanted to look at before we wrap up here is I wanted to take a look at the ICP chart, right? And so there's two things we can see here. What we can see now is it does look like we are forming in on a wedge, and we can see it's actually a pretty clean wedge as far as how the lines are drawing, but it also is following this overall macro downtrend, right? We've yet to break through kind of this trend line over here. And one thing that I did want to show you, because when sometimes I bring up on the channel that wedges are bullish structures, but that does not mean they're guaranteed to be breakouts, right? This is a perfect example. We can see that even right here, this actually looked like it was forming into a pretty clean wedge. And usually this means a breakout to the upside, but obviously this did not. This was a break to the downside. And then obviously we've consolidated into another wedge here. So, again, not financial advice. You need to make your own decisions and, do your own research, all of that type of fun stuff. But generally, when you're trading in a wedge like this, it's best to kind of, if you're going to trade in the wedge, trade after it bounces off of the support line, because that's essentially going to be your point of maximum return. Or if you're not going to do that, because again, the wedge can break down. So when you're taking a trade within the wedge, you are not guaranteed that it's going to work out for you. Statistically, it usually does more times than not, but you are not guaranteed. So if you're not going to take it bouncing off the bottom trend line, and you can essentially set your stop loss really close, essentially below the trend line, because if it breaks down, then it's probably going to fall down. I mean, we did see a couple wicks here, so it's not guaranteed. But usually to trade a wedge, when it breaks out, you need it to close out of the wedge, and then that essentially will indicate a continuation. So again, not financial advice, not any sort of advice. This is just my opinion, and at least the patterns that I'm seeing within the crypto market. You have to make your own decisions and figure out if this is the right way for you to trade or not. So that's pretty much all I've got today on ICP. Please do let me know if you like the video. Please do give it a like, and also give me a subscribe if you found the information in this video useful. It was nice learning more and presenting more of a cohesive research strategy, or research presentation, I guess you could say, on the Internet Computer Protocol. Overall, it's really interesting, and I think it's got a really interesting idea that's built very similar to how the internet is currently. So there's not some of these weird crypto like walls to jump over. I'm sure we can all think of like certain like user like difficulties, I guess you could call them, that we have to get around, right? ICP doesn't seem to have much of that. Obviously there is kind of the adoption curve that does need to be, you know, gotten over, but that I would say is kind of for every new type of like software or innovation in the world. So, you know, this is something that's not all too concerning to me. But yeah, if you did find the video, you know, informative and useful, please do give it a like and subscribe. It does help push me out, you know, to the wider YouTube algorithm and hopefully get more people to watch the video, which honestly, you know, views are kind of the best way to indicate if people are interested in the topic or not. So I do try and watch those closely and tailor my content according to what people like. So if you did enjoy it, you know, please do support me. That really does help. Also, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, anything like that, please do leave me a comment. I do read all of my comments and I respond to all of them as well. So if you'd like to interact with me in any sort of way, just drop me a comment below and I'll definitely be getting back with you. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.